Hi, it's Thursday, February 5th, and we've got a couple of systems to track in the Southern Hemisphere over the next several days. The first one is Invest 90S sitting up here in the open Indian Ocean. This system is likely getting close to being a tropical cyclone and will likely attain that status over the next day or so. And from there on out, we'll likely see the system begin to intensify, and we could be looking at an intensifying cyclone approaching Rodrigues, Mauritius, and La Reunion as we head into the Saturday to Tuesday time frame in the forecast. And we'll probably be spending the most time with the system over the next few days, though I do want to briefly mention, and we'll talk about this in greater detail towards the end of the video, but I do want to briefly mention here we have another system active across Australia today. As the sun rises, you can see some of this clockwise rotation evident here over northern Australia. And this system has been tracking west gradually for the past few days and will continue that track as we head into the latter half of this week and into this weekend. And it's possible that the system does move over water and begin to intensify a little bit. Some models are a little bit more aggressive on that than others, and we'll talk about the exact details of how strong this system could get and the timing on landfall of that later in the video. And I'll leave a timestamp to this if you want to see that section first. But we're going to start off in the Indian Ocean as we have Invest 90S here developing in the Indian Ocean. And like I mentioned, this system will likely be spending a lot of time with for the next several days, as it could be the next significant threat to land as we head into the weekend and into early next week. But focusing firstly on how the system is doing right now. Now, the system has had a fairly unfavorable environment over the past couple of days. We had some upper level convergence that has kept some convection over the past couple of days a little bit at bay. And now today we have seen some divergence increase in the upper level parts of the atmosphere. And you can see that very well here if we look at the water vapor imagery, which helps us see the upper low parts of the atmosphere. And you can see a lot of this flow moving away at the top of the troposphere from Invest 90S. And that is divergent flow helping an efficient process of latent heat release from all the convection and thunderstorms that we're seeing blossom over the system. Though it still has some struggles. As you can see, this system is very lopsided. You can see a well-defined circulation on the southeast side of all of this convection that's blossoming here. And that's because we have an area of high pressure generally placed like this. And so we have some pretty strong southeasterly flow coming into the face of Invest 90S. And this is going to persist through a lot of the day today, though we'll be decreasing over time. So we will see the environment get generally better for the system. Though in terms of rapid development today, not really expecting that. We're going to be looking for, Friday and Saturday for more rapid development into a tropical cyclone, and then some intensification by that point as we get into the latter half of the weekend. And speaking a little bit to that intensity forecast, again, right now it is not in a favorable configuration to intensify, and the intensity forecast is generally, I'd say, the highest confidence part of the forecast that we have going forward. Again, right now you can see in the upper level part of the atmosphere, which this is what this chart is showing. It's showing the upper level flows in streamlines, and you can see that strong southeasterly flow coming into the face of 90S, which is sitting right about here in this map at the surface. And as we go throughout the day today, we'll see that southeasterly flow decrease significantly. So by Friday, the shear is pretty much abated entirely, and by this point, we'll likely be seeing convection get much more centered over the surface circulation, and the system will likely be a tropical cyclone by that point. But as we go in time, by that point, the system is going to be starting to track towards the southwest. And I mentioned that we have some divergence off to the north. And you can see that still in place here by Friday morning local time. Here, you'll see here's the storm now popping up with a red L on this map. And we've got all this blue pointing away from the storm. So you've got all that divergent flow moving away from the storm. Now, this is only in one direction, though. It's towards the equator. But as we go into Friday and Saturday, you'll see this trough digging in here southeast of Madagascar. And this is going to open up a southern outflow channel as well to complement this northern one. And the net effect of that is that you have very efficient latent heat release. When you get air parcels rising into the atmosphere and they convect into convection like we see here, they release latent heat. And if you have an efficient process of releasing that latent heat, you can have a more effective convective process. And that can allow more significant pressure falls at the surface and can allow as that happens, the storm to intensify. And you'll see that happen here in the model. You see, initially, we don't see this pressure decreasing all too much. It's generally hovering around 1,000 millibars. But once we see this southern outflow channel open up, we then start to see more significant pressure falls. And this would be a case where you see quick to rapid intensification occur in the time frame of this weekend going into early next week. Now, the timing on exactly when RI could occur, that is a little bit uncertain, and that is ultimately decided by how the system structure looks in real time. But models are in unanimous agreement that the system will be able to intensify like this going into this weekend. And this is pretty high confidence, I would say, and the highest confidence part of the forecast that we have. And so immediately, this does leave that potential for an intensifying storm to approach the islands of Rodrigues, Mauritius, and La Reunion as we go throughout this weekend and into next week. So it needs to be monitored very closely, and it wouldn't be a bad idea to review your cyclone plans, as this could be, compared to the past couple of storms that we've had pass by, this could be a closer hit for these islands. Still too far out to know if we're going to get a direct hit in any of these islands. You know, the benefit is you are a small point on the map, so it is harder for a storm to hit you directly, but there is that potential. So it is something worth watching and something worth paying attention to for the next several days. Now, speaking a little bit more to that track forecast, and this is where things get a little bit more uncertain and have been uncertain quite a bit over the past couple of days. There is a little bit of a fly in ointment here. If you look here across the big view across the Indian Ocean, you'll see again Invest 90S sitting here, but you might be able also to pick out a little area of low pressure sitting south of La Reunion today. And this is ex-tropical cyclone Fatia, which came southeast over the course of this week, and it's really just stalled here as it weakens rapidly south of the islands. A little quick note, this is not any threat to Mauritius or La Reunion either. This system is dead practically, and really the only thing we have to worry about with this system is its track implications on 90S further towards the north. And this has track implications because this system is just sitting here. And one thing about this is that it has been weakening considerably over the past couple of days. So you'll see that we have the strong upper level flow out of the northwest. This is also because of that high pressure that is shearing 90S further north. And so that means the system is not really tall in the atmosphere. So it's going to be primarily feeling the flow near the surface. And if we take a look at the flow near the surface with this system, and let me go back to the analysis on the model, you'll see that we have two areas of high pressure that the system is wedged in between. We've got this big one sitting across much of the Indian Ocean. This is trying to push it towards the southeast like that upper level flow is trying to. But if we look further west, we've got this area of high pressure sitting southwest of Madagascar, trying to push it back towards Madagascar, back towards the northwest. And the net effect of this is a lot of these forces are just canceling each other out. So the system is just not going to move all too much. And this becomes important for 90S because when the system is sitting here, it keeps a break in between these two areas of high pressure. You'll see that, as I just outlined there, these two ridges are not connected in this map. And the reason for that is Fatia is sitting here. And this is very important for the track forecast for 90S because in this break in the ridge, the flow around this one is trying to pull it down to the south. So this is going to pull the storm towards the southwest. But the question is, how long does Fatia hang on to keep this break in the ridges going? And that has been a part of uncertainty for the past several days with model guidance. There's been several scenarios thrown about by several different models. Some models have had it more progressive. I'm talking about Fatia here being more progressive, that being it tracks towards the southeast quicker and moves out of the scene entirely. That allows the ridges to build in and turns 90S towards the west. Now, the other scenario, and the scenario that models have been trending towards, and we can really see why in analysis right now, in real time, we can see the system is stalling here south of La Reunion. And models have been correcting a little bit to this over the past couple of days. And in that scenario, the system is still sitting here, so we still have this break between the ridges. And so this is now pretty high confidence that the system is going to come south. But the question is still, how far south? And do we still see the system make a westward turn? And while we have had the models trending towards a scenario where Fatia is still sitting here, they have been generally correcting to a weaker storm in reality than they had originally forecasted. And the net effect of that is the ability that FATIA has to keep this break between these bridges in place decreases over time. So what you'll see on this European model is that over time FATIA continues weakening. And the reason for that is because all of the convection with the system is weakening, or not weakening, but it's being sheared away. So you're not allowing that convection to keep that circulation at the surface tight. And so the system weakens over time. And so the net effect of that is that as that system weakens, you now allow an opportunity for these two areas of high pressure to try and connect to each other, to where eventually, as we head into Saturday and Sunday, FATIA is practically gone. And now these bridges are connecting with each other, causing the storm to bend towards the west. And this is a trend that we've seen from the GFS and the European model. And really, most of our reliable global models are suggesting that this westward turn will happen in the track forecast. Now, there is still quite a bit of uncertainty here. Another layer to this that we have not even talked about yet is the upper level part of the atmosphere. If we look here, we have this upper level trough sitting just south of Mauritius and La Reunion. We talked about this digging in a little bit earlier in the video. This also could potentially, in some scenarios that we've seen on model guidance, pull the system to the south. But on some models, it's more progressive, and on some other models, it's slower. In the slower model forecast, this trough hangs around, so the system just simply goes out to sea around the flow of that trough. But in models like the European model, you'll see it start to move out of the scene pretty quickly. By Sunday, it's practically gone. And with the high pressure building in its surface, that means that the system does track towards the west. And so I'm telling you all of this. I know there's a lot of information to dump on you, but I'm showing you all of this to show you that there is still a lot of uncertainty in this track forecast, and nobody's going to be able to tell you exactly where the system is going to go. The most important thing, though, is that you pay attention to the system closely, as we could again be looking at an intensifying storm approaching Rodrigues, Mauritius, and La Reunion, and potentially even long term. Past the 5-day forecast, we could be looking at Madagascar getting in here if this system does indeed turn towards the west. And for what it's worth, the ensembles are coming into better agreement on this westward turn happening. This is the European ensemble. And what you're seeing here with this cloud of red numbers, that's the potential positions where the storm could be by Saturday afternoon. It would be local time. What this is the European ensemble. It's 51, I believe 51 different runs of the European tweaked slightly, so that you get 51 different potential solutions for how the system may evolve over the next few days. And so this gives us a good idea of where the system could go. And so what you'll see that as we go throughout the next several days, we do still have some of that spread. As I mentioned, there could be. We have some members tracking towards the south, potentially because of TIA and partly because of the upper trough that I mentioned digging in here, maybe being a little bit slower. But you'll see the other batch of members making this westward turn, and the vast majority are in this group. And so right now, what Matteo France has done is they've taken the consensus of model guidance, and they're currently showing the storm tracking towards the southwest and then making this westward bend. And there's also another part of this that's very important for land impacts. How far south does it get before it makes this westward turn? And their forecast cone shows this very well. If it makes this westward turn early, then we may stay well north of Mauritius and La Reunion, avoid a lot of the impacts. But if it stays on the southward trajectory more and then makes that westward turn a bit later, then you can see more direct impacts with a core of potentially a cyclone coming through Mauritius and La Reunion. So that's all to illustrate that it needs to be watched very closely. And you'll see that on this map. I'll click away from the wind fields. You can see they have it intensifying into a cyclone. And as I mentioned in the intensity forecast, the environment does look generally favorable for the system to intensify and potentially rapidly as it approaches these islands. So we need to watch this very closely, and I will keep uploads on this over the next several days as I can in my schedule with school, so that I can keep giving you all the updated information on this. And we'll talk about later the potential impacts that we could see to Madagascar. I know we just had Fatia make landfall there, so this is the last thing you want to be hearing of another storm coming around. But that is longer term, and there is a little bit more of uncertainty, as you would expect in longer term, of where the system could go beyond 5 days. So it's really not worth speculating over right now in this part of the forecast. And I will leave a link to the Météo France website that I'm showing here in the description so you can see their latest forecasts as they're issued. But for now, that's all that we have to talk about with 90S. We'll touch on it for the next few days, but now we're going to move to Australia, as we have Invest 98P sitting over Northern Australia. And as I mentioned at the beginning of this video, the system has been gradually tracking west over the past few days, and you can see it's a very broad area of low pressure. And we've seen some models, mainly the GFS, try to light up on the system's intensification potential. You might have seen it if you watched the Southwest Indian Ocean part, that the GFS is strengthening this system very significantly as it comes across the coast of Western Australia. I'm very cautious on that, as the GFS is very alone in that idea, and the GFS does have a bias to go very strong with these systems. And we can use a little bit of logic here to understand why the system may not intensify to the degree that the GFS is showing. And the most clear one that we can see this morning is that this is a broad area of low pressure. And so once this system moves offshore, what it needs to do to intensify rapidly, like the GFS shows, is it will need to tighten up the circulation better. Now that can be done. We do see some pretty good convective activity blossoming along the coast with the part of the low that is over water now. But that is a process that takes a lot of time. And if you look here, this is not even 3 days out, and we're nearing landfall already in Western Australia on this model forecast. It's not a lot of time for the system to adequately make its circulation tighter, and from there on intensify potentially significantly. So much of the model guidance that we have today is not showing the system really intensifying all too much. The other big fly in the ointment with this forecast is we don't even know if it's going to come offshore. And it's very well illustrated if we look at the GFS ensemble. This is showing you the different positions of where the system could be over the next few days. So the GFS has, I think, about 31 different members, so 31 different runs tweaked slightly to give you 31 different scenarios of how the system could evolve in the next few days. And what you'll see is that while the ensemble does see a few members, like the parent model, going offshore and intensifying it potentially significantly, we do have a large sum of members right on the coast or onshore. And if it's onshore or even just next to the coast, that's not really going to allow too much in the way of significant intensification. And so the expectation is that we could see the system develop into a tropical storm. The Bureau of Meteorology currently gives us about a moderate chance of doing so before it makes landfall later this weekend. At latest, it would be about Monday, local time, when it's actually making landfall. But in terms of intensification, right now, not expecting all too much. We could see it be, a tropical storm equivalent, which I think on Australian scale is category 1 or 2. But any significant intensification beyond that is very conditional to, can the system adequately tighten up the circulation, and also can the system get far away enough from the coast to not be impeded by the landmass. Now, there is still some uncertainty with the track forecast, and I will briefly talk about this here. You'll see this polygon does get larger in time as you go in the forecast and the Bureau of Meteorology forecast. There is some uncertainty, partially because we don't know exactly where the system is going to be when it comes offshore. This is getting into 4 and 5 days out, so there is a bit of a spread on where the system could be. If it's offshore, it could take a bit longer before making landfall. That could be a scenario where perhaps you see more of a likelihood of more significant intensification. Whereas if it's staying closer to the coast, it's likely going to come into Western Australia much quicker. So there's still a bit of spread, and there are also some timing issues with this trough that's digging in here southwest of Australia. But that's to be expected at 4 or 5 days out, and those details will be ironed out in time as we get closer to reality. But generally not expecting a very strong storm here. If the GFS scenario does become much more of a possibility, if we see the system becoming more tighter and it's well offshore, then we will talk about the potential when that potential exists, if it does. but not really any reason to get very concerned of a very strong storm, just given some of the real-time trends that we can see with the system right now. And I will keep talking about this over the next several days in any videos that I upload, keeping you all up to date with how the system is performing. And I will leave a link to the Bureau of Meteorology website here so you can see their forecasts as they get issued over the next several days. That's all that I've got for today. It's a lot to talk about over the next few days. That was a long video, but we'll likely have a lot to talk about for the next several days as we're getting a little bit more active here with the two of these systems. That's all for now. Thanks for watching.